We cannot be dragged backward by the very dangerous lies of a former president.
Spare me. There are greater threats to the country right now, you may have noticed. They need Trump. Trump is a distraction. And Liz Cheney will substitute for Trump. You can see how the media are swiveling away from this. So you have the Middle East in flames. You have massive inflation. You have an economy that is in the doldrums, even though we should be in the greatest period of economic growth of our lifetimes. I mean, bar none. Right? We were expecting that GDP growth this quarter was going to be just astounding. And instead, we got job growth that was 750,000 jobs under what it was supposed to be this month. All of that is happening. They're pushing for radical social policy that shifts the nature of the deal between individual Americans and the federal government. They're invading religious freedom rights. They're invading the ability of corporations to operate as they want to with regard to free markets. This administration is a bleep show, and the consequences are obvious to everyone. And so they are deeply reliant on Joe Biden. So the media, who are they just are the PR wing of the Democratic Party. That's all they are. The establishment media understand there is no distinction whatsoever between the DNC press office and the actual press. There's no distinction. They are the same. The same people occupy the same positions, which is why they move so smoothly from one to the other. You'll see people working for the New York Times, and then suddenly they just pop up, boom, right there in the Biden administration. You see it on CNN all the time. It's not rare. Okay, so they've decided that they are going to misdirect away from the chaos that has been engulfing pretty much everywhere. And they are going to misdirect toward this Liz Cheney story. Now, as I've been saying, does anyone know who the number 3 House Minority Party leader was like 5 years ago? Can you name the person? Having trouble, are you? Yeah, because no one cares. Who cares who the number 3 is in the House Minority Party? You're not even talking about the House Majority Party. You're talking about the House Minority Party. But Liz Cheney is getting all sorts of press because yesterday, Liz Cheney was voted out of her position as the number 3, not the number 2 and not the number 1. She was voted out as the number 3 in the House Minority Party, specifically because the Republicans in the House were getting frustrated with the fact that Liz Cheney seemed to have a peculiar predilection for the strange new respect offered by the media. 2 months ago, they voted on whether Liz Cheney should stay. She had exactly the same position on January 6th then that she does now. She had exactly the same position on Donald Trump then that she does now. She had exactly the same position on the veracity of the 2020 election then as she does now, but she withstood the vote and did so pretty easily, with the support, by the way, of Kevin McCarthy, the House Minority Leader. Then what happened? She decided, it'd be a great idea. I'm going to go into the media, and pretty much every day, I'm just only going to talk about how Trump sucks and how Republicans who supported Trump kind of suck and how the 2020 election is legit and January 6th is the worst thing that ever happened and all of this. Now, when you're the House Minority Leader, when you're the House number 3, I should say, you have a couple of jobs, okay? And those jobs are sometimes in conflict. Your job as a congressperson is to vote on issues. Liz Cheney, when she votes, is quite good. She voted like 94% of the time, by the way, with Donald Trump when Trump was president. So she actually had a better record of voting with Trump than the new House number 3, who is the kind of aspiring House number 3, Elise Stefanik from New York. Cheney is much more conservative in voting record than Stefanik, bar none. But it's not just about your voting record. It's about, can you raise money for the party, and do you help orient the communications of the party toward taking down the opposing party? Or are you directing all of your fire internally? Are you spending all of your time giving MSNBC and CNN and the Washington Post and the New York Times exactly what they want? Now, there is a difference between how you message and what you message. Okay, I have said many times on the show that I agree with Liz Cheney's basic take on January 6th. I agree with her basic take on how the election of 2020 went. I don't think it was decided by voter fraud and irregularity. I think that if there was rigging, it was by the media, which lied consistently for years. I think that Trump's behavior between the election and January 6th was pretty egregious. I talked about it openly at the time. I talk about it openly now. And I agree with all those things. But let's be real about this. The threat to the country is not coming from a president who has not been in office for 4 months, is banned from Twitter and Facebook, and has been relegated to starting a blog and then blasting out emails about how much he hates Liz Cheney. These kind of bizarre emails. Okay, that guy is not the deep threat to the country. The threat to the country is an authoritarian left that has taken over every major institution in American life, is on the move at the top of the American government, is creating inflation, unemployment, and chaos in the Middle East. That is the threat. Why is Liz Cheney not talking about that? Okay, that is the specific reason why she was ousted. Again, she held the same positions that she does now 2 months ago, and she survived the vote. Then she decided, I'm going to use the intervening 8 weeks to do nothing but crap on Republicans. And Republicans, predictably, were like, you know what? We don't need you in House leadership. That's not a thing that we require. We can have any other Republican who's a better fundraiser than you and doesn't spend all their days trying to give Joe Scarborough all sorts of fever dreams. Like try not to do that if you're in House leadership. Okay, so Cheney has been doing this thing where she basically has made herself hero of the Republic, strange new respect recipient from the left. And she has done so by suggesting that the reason that she's being ousted from House leadership is not because of her lack of what we would call in Hebrew seichel, or her lack of common sense. The reason she's being ousted from House leadership is because specifically she took this position. Well, it's a combo, right? She did take a position that is fairly unpopular with the Republican base, but she could survive that. She could. She absolutely could survive that position. If she did not make her top priority the consistent weird take that the great threat to the country is a president who is no longer in office and is not widely influential via his blog. Okay, like there are greater threats to the country right now, you may have noticed. Okay, but Liz Cheney has decided that she kind of went into this thing without an exit strategy. She decided she was going to start this fight and she really didn't know how to get out of it. So the only way to get out of it is to keep on doubling down. So here she was yesterday talking about how today's vote shows where the GOP is. No, what today's vote shows, or yesterday's vote showed, is that the GOP does not wish to spend all waking moments talking about a guy who's not in office. That if they ignore whatever silly things Trump is saying in his emails and focus in on, the crises facing the country, they'll win back the House. But you, Liz Cheney, have spent every waking moment, apparently, dealing with Trump. I don't understand why, and no one else does either. But this is exactly what the media want. What the media want, they know the only way the Democrats are able to retain the House in 2022 is by labeling the Republicans too crazy to be elected. Right? To say that the Republicans, they're the party of Trump. Now, that's a real bank shot because Trump ain't going to have been in office for a couple of years by 2022. But that's really their only hope because their own record sucks. The entire media is looking for this too because they would much rather cover Liz Cheney versus Kevin McCarthy and the Republicans than cover the fact that a doddering old president who doesn't know what the hell is going on is presiding over a bizarrely timed collapse on nearly every front. So here's Liz Cheney giving the media exactly what they want.
Do you feel betrayed by today's vote?
I do not. I think that it is an indication of where the Republican Party is, and I think that the party is in a place that we've got to bring it back from, and we've got to get back to a position where we are a party that can fight for conservative principles, that can fight for substance. We cannot be dragged backward by the very dangerous lies of a former president.
Okay, I have a question. Who's dragging us backward? Who's talking about this the most? Who decides that it's important to answer every single question the media asks you about this sort of stuff and spend 90% of your time on it? There are two ways that you're dragged backwards here. Okay, one, she's correct. You shouldn't go around suggesting that Trump's prevarications are not prevarications. They were. You shouldn't go around suggesting that Biden's the president. Okay, but there's another way you're dragged backwards, and that is relitigating this thing over and over and over as though it makes a damn bit of difference. Okay, well, that's what Liz Cheney's been spending every day doing. Well, Kevin McCarthy yesterday, he was specifically asked about this. He said, listen, we're not questioning who the president is. We just met with him 5 seconds ago.
The conference will decide, but I don't think anybody is questioning the legitimacy of the presidential election. I think that is all over with. We're sitting here with the president today. So from that point of view, I don't think that's a problem.
Okay, meanwhile, Cheney is receiving exactly what you would expect, the strange new respect to the media. You think that Liz Cheney, at House number 3, would be being interviewed by Savannah Guthrie on national TV if this weren't happening? The media are all over this because they don't want to cover the actual news. Okay, this is not a big news story. I'm sorry. An internal House battle is not a big news story. It's certainly not a bigger news story than the fact that the entire House infrastructure for the Democrats last year refused to condemn Ilhan Omar for her open anti-Semitism, so she just keeps being an anti-Semite. But the media didn't cover that either in the same way. This is blanket, wall-to-wall kind of stuff because they need Trump. Trump is a distraction. Trump is the shiny object. Trump is the misdirection. And Liz Cheney will substitute for Trump because she, by dint of what she's talking about, makes Trump the issue. So here is Liz Cheney with Savannah Guthrie. Again, is this something that a House GOP number 3 should be doing? Interviews with MSNBC's Savannah Guthrie on the Today show about how terrible the other Republicans are?
Do you think Leader McCarthy has placed his own ambitions to be Speaker of the House above principle?
I think that he is not leading with principle right now. And I think that it's sad, and I think it's dangerous. And I think that we are at a moment where the Republican Party has to have leaders that are focused on principle.
I mean, I'm sorry. Well, which principles are you talking about? Because it turns out that there are several different principles at play. One is focusing on the principle that we don't lie about elections. Agree. Then there's the principle of stop the people in power from wrecking the country. Are you doing that? Really? That's kind of a priority. Okay, I think it's a pretty good indicator that you might be headed down the wrong path here when Jen Psaki from the White House is praising you.
It's disturbing to see any leader, regardless of party, being attacked for simply speaking the truth. And as the president said last week, it's hard to understand. But our belief, his belief, is that the American people will have to make their own decisions about whether the reaction by the people they elected to represent them should be embracing and elevating conspiracies and attacks on our democracy, or whether it should be standing up for ideals that have historically been owned by both Democrats and Republicans representing.
I'm sorry, being lectured about election veracity by the same Democrats who claimed for 4 years that Trump was a Russian cat's paw and suggest that Al Gore was president and suggest that Diebold machines decided the 2004 election and who keep elevating Stacey Abrams, who still refuses to acknowledge that she was not legitimately elected the governor of Georgia. Like, spare me just a little bit. By the way, how much do the media love this story? Which is the reason that Liz Cheney ain't in leadership is because the media love this story so much. How much do the media love this story? According to the folks over at Newsbusters, Curtis Hook reporting, CNN spent nearly 3 times more time on Liz Cheney in 12 hours than all of the economic crises that are hitting the country right now. Very, very clear what exactly the agenda here is. Who's got 2 thumbs and wants you to like and subscribe?